Before that, let me tell you that the violence continues unabated in Manipur. Despite all attempts made by security forces, violence in the state has not ended. House of a legislator, a lawmaker, was also attacked. The peace process or the peace committee has become a non-starter. Various organizations associated with it have said either they were not consulted or they don't want to be there, and some members have said, well, they should have been taken into confidence. This has led to battle lines being drawn between opposing groups in the state of Manipur. The situation is complex. It requires healing. Everyone needs to calm the temper. But Manipur continues to burn. The tribal community is demanding the implementation of president's rule in the state. On the other hand, people say that the meiteis also say that first disarmament needs to take place because the state has become aflush with weapons. And the division is so deep that even organizations which are centrally rooted in Delhi, for example, Akhil Bharatiya Vanvasi Kalyan Ashram, an RSS affiliate body, it has also jumped into the fray. He has said that we will build broken homes, but the fact is that parties which have no immediate concern in the state have also started to speak up. MLAs have been attacked. MLAs' residences have been attacked. Miscreants have burned down the official residence of Manipur Minister Nemcha Kipgen in Imphal West. The incident took place on Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. This comes a day after 9 people were killed and 10 injured after miscreants attacked a village in the Khamenlok area under Kangpokei district. Miscreants opened fire and carried out arson attacks in the villages. Meanwhile, opposition too is leaving no chances. Nothing to chance. Congress has said that the government needs to do more. The double-engine government has failed. Now, I really don't want to get into what people in Delhi are thinking because our program is about Manipur and people of Manipur. So first, let us listen to a couple of reactions which have come in, and let me remind our viewers, it is very difficult for us to get the reactions, put up this show for you every day for one simple reason, because there is an internet ban in Manipur. So when we do this show, it takes hours and hours to get the footage, get those bites, get important guests, relevant people who understand Manipur, who are achievers, professors, doctors, PhD students, lawmakers, not people sitting in Delhi drawing rooms, but people who are either born in Manipur, brought up in Manipur, are of Manipur, understand Manipur. So it takes us a lot to get there. And this is a commitment, News9's commitment. So before I start my conversation on broad point, president's rule or disarmament first, in a conversational form, let us listen to the bites which are available with us.
Particularly the violence with gun is done as per report by the Kuki militant. I was told like that. And if it is the Kuki militant who are under the domain of the SHU, they have to be controlled properly and also to be monitored properly. There are about 14 designated camps. Let the monitoring agency should monitor it, whether all those activists are in their designated camp or their weapons are deposited or not. If it is certain and if there is intact in all the designated camp, there should not be any kind of gunfire. If there be anything happen, even if the militants are in the designated camp, then that will be another, the examination is required.
So the situation is quite critical indeed.
Backward?
Yes. The situation is quite critical in Manipur in several districts. How would you look at it?
That has to be normalized through peace committee peace process is going on, not only constituted by the central government. There are some voluntary organizations. They come out to make the understanding between different communities. And with all the different beliefs and religions, they are clubbed together and they are now approaching to make understanding and to bridge the mistrust gap.
Why the violence has been happening again and again in Manipur?
That shows the security, the problem needs more tighten.
Is security lapses and failure of a peace management committee also?
I think so. It should be.
It's a failure of a peace management committee?
It's the failure of the monitoring group who are in charge of the designated camp. They should monitor it. And there's, at any case, they should bring those militants in the camp.
You are the only answer. Do you think what kind of a step still has to be taken for a peaceful Manipur?
The first thing is that the mistrust has to be removed and the false news propaganda should be stopped, and even the central media, the publication of news has to be verified, whether it is a fake or it is one-sided or favoring some other group. But media, ethically, I suppose, to look into the reality and ground situation and fact-based news should be published. Otherwise, a wrong message will always create sometimes. The real history of Manipur is not reflected so far in the central media.
Religion, is that what kind of impact are you thinking of?
He initiated to visit Manipur, and accordingly I requested some of the senior citizens of Manipur and the counterpart of Art of Living in the sector of Manipur and different believers of the groups, religious group of Manipur. They are sitting together and they are organizing with the joint hand of the Art of Living, Ravi Shankarji. So he will appeal to the people both sides to bring the peace, and humanity is there. Humanity should be like this, he will say it. But the violence, if violence continue, the sufferer is the common people, women and students. That we have to understand it.
What's the main is or border is also a difference?
In my opinion, the illegal immigration should have been checked earlier. But there was a good atmosphere. The Kuki, all Kukis are not bad. The all Kuki, OLD, all Kuki, who were migrated, who were during the king's time, they know the lifestyle and livelihood and nature of Manipur. But in the recent past, because of the political upheavals in the Myanmar, the continuous flow of immigrant of the same ethnic assimilates were entered to the territory of Manipur, and that has not been properly recorded. That will be one of the major factors. Because of that, limited resource, land resources, very limited, and sometimes we should not classify the hills and valley. There is no valley geographically. It's a small intermountain valley. The 90% is a hill. So it should be a hilly state. The resource sharing should be in an amicable way. Otherwise, if it is based on the ethnic line, it will be occurring again and again. In a democracy like India, and who believe in Indian constituency, any state should be not in the line of ethnicity. We appeal to all sections of people, and we appeal to all the religious groups. We appeal to all the citizens of Manipur, CSOs of Manipur, to bring back our earlier peace, and so that after bringing the peace, after stopping the violence, we may have another discussion for long-lasting bonding.
Last night, on date 13, around 11 a.m., 11 p.m. There was a gunfire at the peak Khonumpai. And now we have bring here 9 dead bodies and deposit at the Jennings morgue. Huh?
Any injured?
There are 10 injured, and it's from Majesty.
Before I start the conversation, I'll take the first comment from our news editor, Ibrahim Verghese. Verghese, tell me, more than 45 days of this conversation in Manipur, do you think that the state government has been able to live up to its expectations?
Well, it doesn't seem that they have been able to get anything on the ground running, because today also we were getting reports saying that when the army or the paramilitary personnel were moving from one place to the other, they were faced with resistance from the state bureaucracy in many ways, sometimes non-cooperation with the demands that they have, to the point where the Indian Express today had in fact put out a story saying that the army as well as the police forces were having an argument to the point where they started to cock their guns. So this is the level at which resistance that they are facing, and from one place to the other they are also seeing a series of protests. So when it comes to the state government, well, it looks like the lower bureaucracy is not being able to provide as much as they are supposed to provide on the ground, and that is the cause of concern, because we are all dependent on them. So no matter how much of soldiers we airlift, no matter how much of supplies we put into the state, they are the ones who are supposed to be on the ground and providing the kind of support we have to have. And it seems that this bureaucracy is the one that is highly polarized, and that is stopping from the actual work on the ground, whether it is peace, whether it is for the law enforcement to take place, being affected completely.
I think that's a very important point, that the lower bureaucracy, it's so much polarized. Let me tell you that I'm joined by N Biren Singh, Congress Working President, Manipur. He's on phone line with me. Sir, a very warm welcome to you. I've also got Professor Bhagat Vainam. Professor, you have written a very strong article today. I read it in the newspaper. I have my questions ready for you. A very warm welcome to Professor Bhagat, Professor Kham Khan Swan, who has been regularly joining us with his sharp analysis. A very warm welcome to you, sir, for making time. I'm also joined by Thangmin Lal Dongal, PhD researcher and scholar. He made some pertinent points in my show yesterday. A very warm welcome to you, sir. And Major General Sudhakarji, who's going to give us a perspective. A very warm welcome to you, sir. In context of the border, the use of drone, and how this theatre has become increasingly intense, though different from Kashmir and Punjab, but in terms of national security, very, very important one. But I would like to first go to Mr. N Biren Singh, who joins me on phone line. Sir, I would like to ask you point blank, what is going wrong? Why has Peace Committee come a cropper? And should disarmament happen first or the president's rule?
Thank you for being invited into the panel discussion. We also like to participate in the kind of discussion which we are having, because we will get your ground reality what is going on in the state. In fact, disarmament will not easily come, because the arms have been held by people who defend themselves. Without the arms, they think they will die, they will be attacked. There was hardly any presence of security. It is promised by the Constitution in the way people believe a government should protect its citizens. Secondly, I'll come to the point where it went wrong. It went wrong on the third May, when there was a visiting dignitary in the state, the Vice President in India. All the top brass police officials, government attentions were given to the visit of the Vice President when there was the action rally in Churasanpur headquarters, escorted by armed guards, the armed militants. The DC, what he was doing at that time, we do not know exactly whether he warned the government that around 11:30, 11 o'clock they started the rally. It ended around 1 o'clock, and what message he kept from Churasanpur to the city, takes hardly 1 hour, 10 minutes, 1 hour, 20 minutes to do so. So any forces from nearby, from Kota, there is a village where nearby only 15 minutes, there is a posting of army and the cantonments, and there are a lot of the security forces around that area. It was in rush to the Rasanpur area to get rid of all what is going to happen. Then secondly, around 1 o'clock, it started doing, the violence started doing here and there, the skirmishes, the counter-blocking done in Moirang by some politicians, local politicians, maybe at the behest of the government, we do not know, but it is being claimed. So the sentiments were, I think, around 2 o'clock. By 2 o'clock, the attack started in a community village, then started spreading by 3 o'clock. By 3 o'clock, the vandalization started, and indiscriminately it went, started spreading to Mure, then to other places, Kankopi and other places. Suddenly by 3:30 o'clock, the whole thing has been burning. But then the government was not aware of it. When the vice president left Imphal, it was around 5 o'clock. It has become almost too late because the fire was spreading. The attack was spreading and the counter-attack, everything, neutralized and everything has been positioned properly. Then second day also, the government did not do anything to stop the violence. It could have stopped them on the fort if they prepared or eager to do that. Then it extended up to fifth. By fifth, it is beyond any control. Now, at the moment, I'm coming to the position where we are. The villagers are defending with arms. They either been given away voluntarily by the police stations or by the battalion. We do not know exactly. No one has seen it. But how could, from different police stations, arms could be snatched by civilians without any arms? Unarmed civilians, how could they snatch those arms from the police stations or the battalion? So it is very, very unfortunate thing, and the security forces, instead of them themselves protecting the citizens, they could not do that. And instead of that, they delivered arms to the citizens, then it has come to this position. So government, I come to the point that this committee that has been formed, this is also another disaster. Because there are people of questioning integrity, because they are doubted to have sentiment against the state. They have been put into that. They are uninvited members of the members are put in the peace committee. Many of the peace committee members have actually has no track record of having experience in dealing in situations of like this. So the peace committee has to be effective. Composed of, there are some good people, of course, there, but they are minuscule, very small quantity. So therefore, I must say that disarmament will happen only when there is a sign of peace coming and that there is a trust on the security, there is a trust on the government. See, the government is not functioning well because whether there is Article 355, whether there is no Article 355,
Devbratji, I think Devbratji, you made a point on which I would like to get other people in because that, you made a very strong point on how disarmament may fructify. But your focus was how. Professor Bhagat, you wrote an editorial today. I read the editorial. Why do you argue that disarmament is required before the president's rule? Why is it fundamentally important for things to stabilize? Can you take our viewers through? Can you take us through the editorial you wrote?
Yeah, I mean, president's rule is not the issue. I mean, Biren Singh is not the issue really. If you talk in terms of how the state is to function at the moment or how it is functioning, already there is a security advisor and who is directly under the Home Ministry, central government. So it is as good as president's rule in many ways. Already paramilitary forces are there. So it's not the issue at the moment. The moment what we need to do is disarm all the militants, both in the valley as well as in the hills. Unless you do this, no matter whether it is a president rules or other, sporadic violence is going to continue. This is my reading, the way things have been happening in the last few days. So people are very angry at one level. Those who are suffering, they do suffer and their voices are very meek. Those who want peace, their voices are also very meek, very small number, no doubt. And many are unable to speak out So in order for sane voices to come up, what we need to do is stop those who are potential troubleshooters. And these troubleshooters are those who are with guns, arms in their hands. Whether it is Sud militants in the hills, or it is charge of peoples among the meiteis who are up in arms, whether they are stolen arms or they are what you call licensed gun. It amounts to the same because you have firearms in your hands. So this has to be stopped. Unless you stopped it, whatsoever forms of government you call, it is not going to help.
So you are saying that it's not going to help. My colleague Verghese had a very important point, that army is not being assisted properly because of complete polarization of the lower bureaucracy. Professor Bhagat, do you agree with that?
See, there is a point you must have heard in Sero areas in Sugnu, where Assam Rifles came and almost blocked the gate of the police station. And almost both the parties were up in arms, a bit less than trigger shooting at each other, So that was the kind of tension that happened. I also remember at the initial stage, Mr. Kuldeep Singh, who is the security advisor, had this plan that all the paramilitary forces will be attached with Manipur police, so that it is a combined force which operates. So far as I learned, that Assam Rifles was against that plan. Perhaps time has come to revisit the combined operation or functioning of the security forces, whichever the command it may be under. But there should be, I am no one to say who will lead, but certainly there are experts, they are in the police as well as in the military fraternity, the captains, the commanders of Assam, and you have the security advisor who is an IPS officer. So they are the best people to decide how this combined forces are to be, operationally functioning. But that should be checked out. That should be a way in which, whatever polarization you see, if you put them together under a command combined, perhaps the discipline and falling in line may come up.
Okay, Professor Swan, I would like to respond to it. Do you feel that the president's role is required, or you think that immediate disarmament must happen before other things can take place? Because an armed civil society is a problem, and we have seen in Chhattisgarh when the state created Salwa Judam.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. The point that the Manipur MP race, I think, is to be seriously viewed, because very unfortunately, somehow, he in fact peddled across a very problematic narrative which seeks to portray the Kuki Zou communities as troublemakers, as it were. I think this has to be nuanced, because the issue at hand now is that these armed militant organizations used as instruments by the state, the Arambai Tengol, the Meitei Lipun, and all those who operate within a larger institutionalized ecosystem, I think they are the major source of this offensive strike that Bhagat in effect pointed out, but did not dealt in detail, because the context in which there was this confrontation between the police commando in Shiro with the Assam Rifle posted there was this tacit agreement that the Assam Rifle and, for that matter, paramilitary force would provide buffer to any possible offensive strike from the armed militant organization from the valley areas. And that is precisely where these police commandos try to transgress that tacit agreement, that they were forestalled in doing that, and that's where the minor skirmishes arise. And this is precisely the point that you raise is pertinent. I think President's rule and disarmament should be a parallel track. It cannot be one preceding the other, because the kind of proxy arrangement that we have now is neither backed up by the constitutional provision because Article 355 is still not yet formally declared, which means that despite the massive deployment of central paramilitary force in the state, they continue to act in the aid of the existing law and order machinery in the state. And that is precisely where I thought that the role of the central paramilitary force is somehow circumscribed. They have not been given direct control and command over how rule of law and order should be regulated. I think so long as these armed militant organizations who had been given extensive ammunitions, more than 5 lakhs and 4,000 automatic rifles are in effect immediately tackled under relevant provisions of the law, immediately proscribed, and they be prosecuted under relevant provision of Unlawful Activities Act. This mayhem is not likely to end very soon. And this constitutional anomaly of using proxy arrangement without any constitutional, backup provision has to be, given way to a direct president rule. Unless this comes about, and the elephant in the room, that is Biren Singh, who continues, despite the argument on the contrary by Bhagat and others, who refuse, to put the blame squarely on the elephant in the room, that is Biren Singh, I do not think that any meaningful, stability or law and order is likely to be leveraged in the state.
Before I go to the General and then to Mr. Dongal, Varghese wants to make a point, and Bhagatji, then I'll come to you.
Well, Kartikeyaji, one thing that I've understood from this, there is this trust deficit with the armed forces on the ground itself, whether it's the police or the central forces who are here. It looks like one community trusts the police and one community trusts the armed forces. And of course, the mutual trust that is not there between these communities on the police as well as the armed forces that are there on the ground. This is also probably compelling this kind of a situation that we see, where it's become very complex for all these, armed forces, whether the police as well as the paramilitary forces, to operate. So, as they were, in fact, Professor Bhagat was saying that there needs to be some kind of discipline that has to be put with a coordinated effort on the ground. Again, it looks like that CBM, the need for building confidence-building measures, should start from having probably a combined force and operations.
Okay. On this, I would, General Saab, what do you have to say on Varghese when he says that people have different perception of police, people have different perception of army? How will situation work then, sir?
Okay, Kartikeya, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to your show, and compliment the co-panelists who have very comprehensively given out the narrative, and also Mr. Varghese. Okay, let me address the issue in a holistic manner. Let me start. How do I start? Let me start. What is the need of the hour? The need of the hour, to my understanding, Kartikeya, is normalcy, peace. It doesn't matter whether president's rule comes in or the civil government continues to make amends, carry out mid-course corrections, and rectify the steps taken so far. It doesn't make any difference. But what actually matters is, if peace is required, then it's a very hard thing to achieve in a place like Manipur as of today. Any hard thing required to be achieved requires hard steps, very difficult steps. So when we talk about the hard steps, what are the hard steps that come to our mind? As a military man, what comes to my mind is that despite the armories having been locked and sealed and guarded, some of them getting looted. More than 4,000 weapons have been looted. Uncalled for. This is not acceptable at all. Why have they been looted? That is the first question coming to my mind. If they have been looted, if there are 4,000 or more, how many have been recovered? 1,000. The latest, I was just browsing the net and I saw 1,040 have been recovered. That's not good enough. In 45 days' time, if we are unable to identify the problem to reach the end state, which I have outlined, end state is peace and harmony, then I think there is a serious problem of the apparatus which is existing, which is meant or expected to deliver result on the ground. So then what is the problem? The problem, to my mind, is very rightly Mr. Varghese brought out, is the trust deficit. The same trust deficit which was the trigger way back in 90s, if I remember correctly, when the insurgency took off, the civil population had a serious trust deficit in the security apparatus. So a thing like a patient or a man in the ambulance being set on fire when the police is present. I mean, this is an incredible thing happening. So what happens to the civil population? They lose faith in the police. Yes, there may be a dichotomy in what you are saying, that some are having trusting the army people, some are trusting the police people. These are damn things that have to be. We are here as a media to play a very responsible role. I don't believe in going in for schisms and the parochial distinctions. We need to actually bridge the gap as far as possible. What I have in the mind is that hard steps have to be taken. What are the hard steps coming to my mind? First and foremost thing, contrary to the traditional and historical understanding between Myanmar and India, seal the border. The border is 352 kilometers. Cut out all the migration taking place from Myanmar. And mind you, our people know, the security advisor, I'm sure he's mindful of the fact that Myanmar since 1st of February 2021 is a different Myanmar. It is not the same democratic Myanmar which was existing earlier. It is the Myanmar where the military junta is having the final say. It is the Myanmar where you have meitei and Kukis. It is the Myanmar, same meitei and Kukis are fighting against each other, and they are taking help of the military junta to strike and fire and kill each other's group. So therefore, we need to be mindful of this fact. We need to be mindful of the fact that in the border between Myanmar and China, there is a province called Yunnan province, and in the Yunnan province, there is a place called, forgetting the name, Ruli. In Ruli, without any gun license, if an AK-47 is costing around 1,65,000 or 2 lakh and plus, you get it in measly sum, 25,000 rupees or equivalent, without any license. Sniper weapons have been reported to be used in Manipur Valley, not heard of in the past. No terrorist organization or militants ever in the past, at least in my service period, I have not seen or having been reported by my junior that the insurgents are using the sniper rifles. And it has happened about a month back or 40 days or 30 days back, 25, 30 days back.
Okay.
So where are the sniper rifles coming from? So allow me, Kartikeya, I have something to convey. So what I'm coming to, it is not only the situation in Myanmar. There are easy weapons which are available. There are contrabands which are freely flowing across this 16 kilometers that side and 16 kilometers that side, this side. Their people, the Myanmar people can come towards our side, our people can go toward. There is no system of visa existing. There is no sealing of border. There is security. Assam rifle is deployed. You all know, you've been on the ground, you know how the military is deployed. They are not deployed like, you go onto an extended form or they're deployed in a tactical manner. There is a gap in between. And even if they dominate and deny, people are allowed, formally, officially, they're allowed to come inside. There is narcotics coming in a big way. Narcotics is playing havoc in Manipur. It is not only the poppy plantation, it is the narcotics in different...
I think you made 3 points. I would just, because, multiple points would mean that, I would forget the important points of the conversation. And there are 2 people also waiting, and Bhagat Saab has also raised his hand. Mr. Dongle is waiting, then I would like to go to the senior leader who is with us from Manipur on phone line because internet is not working. So Mr. Dongle, your response, I could not give you the chance to speak in the debate early on, and then I'll move to the MPCC chief.
Thank you, Kartik-ji, very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Your response
to
what the esteemed panelists have said.
Right. I want to raise 3 pertinent questions. Now, I think Professor Oina was adequately responded by Professor Swan, but then there are 3 pertinent questions that I would like to raise. One is, why is the attack still happening? How is that being allowed? Despite the imposition of 355 article, which Professor Swan has also said, it is proxy in nature. You see how these attacks has been happening. Yesterday, 13 and 14, the attacks that happened was on Kuki villages. We don't know actually, and there was a news circulated saying that the RAF have asked for more helmet, bulletproof chest, this thing guard, because they have to defend themselves. Because they have to defend themselves from, the so-called militants who are dressed in police uniform. Now that's surprising when you see the attacks and the arson also happening continuously in the Kuki villages. Now we can really pinpoint without any doubt that atrocities or otherwise the offenses, from where the offense is coming. Secondly, there is an urgent need to curtail the false allegations and false news that has been reported. Yesterday there was a news clip where Khamenlok is a Kuki village. Khamenlok per se is a Meitei dialect, whereas it is a Kuki village. That Khamenlok village was attacked by Kuki militants or Kuki volunteers, and 9 people have been reported dead. This kind of news, false reporting, you know what? And in addition to this false news reporting, what happened is false news are being circulated saying that it is the Kuki Sioux, it is the Kuki militants that is involved in attacking Meitei villages, whereas there is a clear proof that Meitei villages or otherwise Meitei inhabited areas are intact. See, when they continuously falsify and spread this sort of false knowledge, it becomes telling from the part of the youth, that they have to fight for their own land and for their safety. That's how they're able to garner more youths to come up and then hold guns and then go and fight. Now, thirdly, you have, our point of talking, General has rightly pointed out, our point of discussion should have also been the looted guns. 4,000, more than 4,000 guns have been looted. You have just few recoveries. There are around 2,000 plus guns with the civilians. See, this sort of, this sort of incident wherein guns are still with the civilians definitely tells that violence is not going to end.
Well, Karthik,
now,
just to add to what the panelists were saying. Just to add to what the panelists were saying.
Dongle, you complete, huh?
Yeah, please allow me to come back.
Yes, okay.
This is my last point. Now, if we look at what Professor Oinam has said, for me and for the Cookies, and as a research scholar who is closely looking at the unfolding of events and the problem, I see the real problem is to do with the state administration. Of course, the state administration is under our Chief Minister, N Biren Singh. And lastly, and that is why demand for president rule is mandatory, is urgent, and in fact, disarmament of the public or the volunteers or whatever we call them should precede. President's rule should precede disarming of these people. And you look at the distress that is already.
I would like to say one thing. I'll give you a chance again. You know me. Yesterday, you went off air and I called you back on my show. I want to say one thing, and I want to say this with honesty, my commitment to my 23 years of journalism. When I started this conversation, I never realized that somehow, and I want all my guests on my screen. I want PCR to put all my guests on my screen, especially Professor Oinam and Professor Swan. That I will get accused by lot of people. आपने एक दिन कुकीज़ को बोलने का ज़्यादा वक्त दिया, फिर एक दिन किसी ने मुझे फ़ोन करके कह दिया आप तो बहुत मेहतीज़ को बोलने का वक्त दे रहे हैं, हम आपसे बहुत नाराज़ हैं. फिर किसी दिन मेरे गेस्ट कोऑर्डिनेटर रॉनी को कुछ लोगों ने कह दिया आप तो नागाज़ को भी वक्त नहीं दे रहे हैं. For me, Professor Oinam is Professor Saab. I read him. I am a student of sociology. I have done my master's from Delhi School of Economics. I have done my history from St. Stephen's history. I respect people with academic rigor. For me, Professor Swan is Professor Swan. There is nothing more than that, and I'm telling this to the viewers who are watching it. They're not here because they come from different communities. They're here because I respect them as scholars. They have put years in what they have been doing. So, you know, when I get those WhatsApp messages कि आप उनको बोलने का वक्त दीजिए, इनको बोलने का वक्त दीजिए, I want to tell them once again, I call people on this show because they understand Manipur, they participate in a civil discourse, they know more than me, they speak well, they don't fight with each other. And I'm not made this an armchair thing where those 20, 50 people sitting in Delhi pontificate about every part of India, which you see in every channel. That is why I'm telling this to my viewers. I make it a point to request every person associated with Manipur, in Imphal, in Agartala, in Guwahati, outside, to please come on my show. So, you know, this was something which was really upsetting me since yesterday when people said, आप तो इनको देते हैं बोलने का वक्त. मैं इस शो के माध्यम से कहना चाहता हूँ, मैं किसी को नहीं देता हूँ ज़्यादा कम वक्त. मैं सिर्फ वक्त पढ़े लिखे लोगों को देता हूँ जो मणिपुर समझते हैं. और मेरे सामने जो लोग बैठे हैं, they are educated people, that is why they are here. And I will call them again and again because they know more than me. Verghese, you were saying something, and then I'll go to Singh Saab Devbrat and then Oinam ji had raised his hand.
Well, just to add to what the kind of arms we were talking about, there is a complexity within that itself. First of all, you have bolt action rifles, simple hunting rifles that are there in circulation as they are used for licensed holding of those arms. Then you have complicated sniper rifles that are there. Then you have self-loading rifles. Then you have the other series of automatic rifles that are there. Now, we can understand till bolt action rifles, and if they are looted from the armories, also self-loading rifles also could have been looted. But then from where do you get these complex arms that have an American signature on it, or you have a Russian signature on them? They come from militant groups to a large extent. So the Meiteis, or whether the Kukis, whether the kind of arms that they have, well, when we see the sophistication of the arms rising, it shows that some outside forces are also involved in it. And that should be the cause of concern in a way. So I agree that the disarmament program should first be there. Then you have the president's rule, or parallelly both, as a lot of them are saying. But the question is, there's too much of arms within the system and it's getting complicated. So that should be addressed as fast as possible.
Devbrat ji, what is Congress doing? Point blank. What is Congress doing as one of the principal opposition party to bring communities together in Manipur?
We are involved in all those things, the regular activity of providing relief and consulting people, appealing to the people, and having press conference every alternate days on whenever it is required. And there is also expose from AICC that we supply materials from here, that what went wrong with the government, and the government, the party with the government at the time of election, how they are cohabiting with the ultra militants to win the vote. All these things we are exposing so that the truth comes out and the peace comes soon. Secondly, I'll come to the point where the general also said just before me that the stakes in the present crisis is not the citizens themselves, the different groups themselves. It is also from across the border in the form of incursion, and also we can go up to Chittagong. From there, also the arms are coming and the drugs are going. It's almost narco-terrorism now. The the claims of the various groups are not what they are saying now. So we have to be very careful to deal with. I cannot, as a political party, name anybody, and I cannot take side with any community. We are in the middle. We stand for a secular democratic country with peaceful governance. So, taking to the point, I am deeply inspired by the general who spoke before me. If I am right, he is Mr. Verghese. Is it right, Kartikeya?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
So he talked about a lot of different technical things about the border. Border has to be sealed. The incursions and the illegal migrants or immigrants as such is a major contention among the people in the state, particularly those earlier have been inhabiting it much long time. So the people do not like all the what you say illegal foreigners coming, settling, and claiming rights equally, also creating problems. This we have to be careful about, and we also check that certain populations are all all enough to become indigenous people here. This is the claim of the citizens here. The bone of contention between the two communities particularly is of the illegal immigrants. So there has to be sorted out carefully. Now before that, the border has to be sealed. That we have been complaining to the central government for the last 20 years, and that has never been done. And that there was only 10 kilometers border fences have been done, and then nothing beyond that. And there is a porosity in the border between the Myanmar, particularly Sindh state. We have to be very careful about the Sindh state, what is going on. And it is neighboring our Joykanpur. So Joykanpur is almost the state of the chief. So all these things happening around, how could we bring peace by shouting and having slogans and having press conferences is impossible, because the elements that is affecting this crisis is certainly beyond our control. They are controlled by somewhere else. That the general described very carefully, and I would not like to name it again. And these things being taken into consideration, peace could come. And those constituting this committee, they cannot do so. The circumstances, the physical circumstances we are going to create in the coming few months can create lasting peace.
Okay. Professor Oinam, you had raised your finger. Would you like to come in?
I'm also in a dilemma, because after your show, telephones comes to me, keep ringing, and they complain. I'm particularly from meitei, saying that, see, you didn't rebut what others have said. You are only talking about peace, but in the ground reality it is something else. So,
Bhagat Sahab, but don't they forget, Bhagat Sahab, don't they forget that there's a thing which is written in front of your name, Professor. You know?
Yes.
And I make it a point when I say Professor Swan, Professor Bhagat. Why do I say that? Because you people are teachers.
Absolutely.
You people are teachers. The most important function of a society rests with a teacher, professor. And a society where teachers don't have a role is doomed. It will become extinct. You will have no people processing knowledge. You are the transmitters of that. Is why I use the word professor. Because I don't treat you like community leaders.
Thank you for reminding me that. And both my heart and head says that peace is the only way out. General Saab is absolutely right. I mean, this violence, how long it is going to go? I mean, it only multiplies and multiplies further. And that's not going to help. So the peace in any sense has to come. Now for that, I have written today also, I'm repeating again, disarming is extremely important. So far as, you know, quickly, because my other panelists have talked about this unfortunate incident of 13th and 14th. What has been happening, and this is my larger reading, is that I see a distinction, but not so clearly visible, between the ordinary Kuki villagers and these armed militants. Many argue that the silence of the Kuki villagers is a signature to say that they support what the militants are doing, which is not absolutely the case. Many a times you are helpless. State is almost non-existent in every part of this corner of the valley or the hills. So sometimes you have to remain silent. Otherwise, you are going to get the brunt. Now, what has been happening as a trend, I observe, is these militants are well trained and also well somehow doctrinated or taught. Because when they attack the villages, they do not really shoot and kill the villagers, but they burn down the villages, create a havoc, create fear, and create uncertainty. And perhaps that is the agenda of the militants. Second, what they also do is they come to the Kuki villages, and from there they shoot towards the meitei villages. And this has been there quite, even what you call Kamenlok area, this has been the case. Now, the responses of the meiteis have been always mob-like. You get angry and charge in large number, and that is how you see lots of casualties happening among the meiteis. And this I see is a mindlessness. Certainly, I mean, this is not the way to go about. But what is bothering me is that lots of telephone calls are being received by the Meiteis in the valley from many Kukis unanimously saying to their friends, saying that they want support, they want help, sometimes the food. And they even have said that one of them have cried. I have written this in my article, that this Kuki guy, he was in the camp and his daughter was unwell, and the medicine he had to ask his Meitei friend to procure, and which he got. And then on the telephone they talked, and he cried and said, Bhai. Bhai is, the Hindi word appropriated in the Manipuri language for the brother, that these evil people have won over, we have lost. So this is what I would like to see, that unfortunately even our intellectuals seems to be taking side of this political positioning. And there seems to be very few voices who will talk for the ordinary people who are, facing the brunt of this violence, both the Kukis as well as the Meiteis. This side has also to be seen. Not every Kuki, not every Meiteis are so concerned with this administrative arrangement or integrity of the state. They also want a peaceful life, day-to-day life to live on. And this side of the story of the common people have to be also voiced at the same time.
I'm coming to you, Professor Swan. Sudhakarji, I'll come to you. I want to read this out to you. I'm not saying that I have worked with a lot of Manipuris. There is a friend of mine called Athuba. I met when I was in India Today group. I want my guests on air. And since then I have kept in touch with him. He works in my previous company, Vion, where he's in the assignment. So he keeps on sending me today, and I want you people to think, because in Delhi people think that Meitei is there, Kuki is there, Naga is there. So he wrote to me, sir, I have a very interesting friend. Her father is a Tankhul, and he says, and in quotes he says Naga, so that I understand. And her mother is a Meitei. Her younger brother got married to a Kuki woman, and she herself got married to a Bihari. She is not an activist or a politician, but a very learned woman. Would you like to interview her? So I said, Athuba, yes, of course. I would like to interview her. Why not? I'll call her if she's free. So what stuck in my eye is, it's like Kerala. People think that it's Muslims, it's Nayars, it's Christians. शादियां तो होती हैं, लोग साथ भी रहते हैं. So this set me thinking from today morning that this gentleman was sent me, and let me be very frank, and he was also as agitated as any Meitei would be at a particular point of time कि यहाँ हमला हो रहा है, ऐसा हो रहा है, ऐसा हो रहा है. लेकिन when he sent me this, and I'm not making up, he sent me this. I'm not making up. He sent me this, and just set me thinking. Professor Swan, then Sudhakarji, I'll come to you.
Yeah, you see, the point that Bhagat makes, that some intellectuals are not above board and possibly peddled the kind of narrative that some of these so-called militant organization is, I think, sometimes amusing to me, because I have not heard a single Meitei intellectual who have called out the militant role of Arambam Tengol, Meitei Lipund, and for that matter, the culpability and complicity of the Chief Minister till today. And I think this is very, very unfortunate. Look at the chain of events that Bhagat just alluded to, Khamenlok, Aigezang, and Kopibung, which in effect was independently reported, not just by the local sources, but also by some of these more independent, crowd-source-funded journalists. Look at Grishma Kuthar, for example, who has sent a very grounded series of, reports, what she titled it as Manipur Dispatch. For example, she report, in the case of the burning down of Aigezang and Khamenlok, 3,500 mobs mobilized. Now, the kind of narrative that we get to hear from the Valley and from Valley area intellectuals, very unfortunately, is that they try to kind of, target a particular community by somehow absolving the culpability of the state commando in mobilizing these massive mobs. Remember that you still have Section 144 CRPC in place? Why is it that 3,500 odds of mobs could be mobilized on the back of police commando when 144 CRPC is in place? That's a hard fact that you cannot run away from. You have to address this issue. And all the so-called attacks are not from the Kuki militants. Let us categorically make it very clear. It's all offensive strike coming from the valley, mobilized, all this armed militant organization frontally led by the police commando. And unless this truth is confronted, a spade is called a spade. I do not see that the real picture that transpired on the ground can be well, analyzed in ways which is above board and objective. That's one point that we have to also take into account. Another important point that I have heard, not only from the MP, Rajkumar Ranjan Singh and Bhagat, is it looks like they continue to kind of put a scapegoat on the role of the Sioux militants. Let us remember that these so-called Sioux militants had been discredited, in the run-up to all these tribal protests, despite the fact that the chief minister, who continued to be so misinformed and ill-informed about the ground realities, continue to castigate these Sioux militants. Remember that these same Sioux militants had been domesticated and they had been discredited. Their legitimacy is thoroughly exposed and questioned because they had been effectively co-opted by the state machinery over this year. And large part of this tribal mobilization, let me remind your audience, is also having to do with the kind of gaps, legitimacy gaps between state institutions and the so-called militant organization who seek to represent the Hill people. There's so much of distrust and lack of legitimacy, so much so that, this popular movement that you have seen today is nothing that has been experienced. It is unprecedented, such and popular mobilization to suggest that these villagers, the village guards who do not speak up, connive with the militants, I think is not squaring up with what actually transpired on the ground. I think people like Bhagat would really would like to broaden, the sources from which they, framed and articulate this type of narrative. I think that is precisely where you would see that despite the lockdown of internet and their systematic plan, by the police commando and the militant organization based from the valley, still today, to strike down some of these, mobile transmission centers, Airtel being one of the last casualty there, right, in these no-zero areas. And because of this information blackout, there is a lot of falsehood and misrepresentation being spread around. Look at the experience of Afrida Hussain, for example, when she reported graphically about the involvement of so-called 500 surrendered militants. Remember that this is just a very conservative estimate. In fact, it is an open secret that all these armed militants which are now used, Arambai Tengol, Meitei Lipund, and all these mobilized mobs are part of a larger institutionalized ecosystem which has been building up since 2001. Remember that when Indo-Naga ceasefire extension was sought to be extended without territorial limit, Biren Singh, as a political leader of the time, was one of the front-ranking political leader who took sworn to protect, the territorial integrity of the state. And this bogey about territorial integrity of the state, which now come back very forcefully, are now dictated by a coordination committee, which take different manifestation. And let us also put into context that some of these organizations, Arambal Tengol, Meitei Lupund, now the COCOMI Coordinating Committee on Protecting Manipur's Integrity, and even Meira Paibis, look at the article which appeared together with Bhagat article this morning. My colleague Hoiniling Silok, for example, look at the very compromised position and role of Meira Paibis as guardian of peace, because their position itself seems to be very compromised, and their target is not so much on the police commando who have wreaked so much of so-called fake encounter killings, and rather on the armed force. And look at some of the context in
Professor
which
Swan, can I stop you?
Trust, let me just finish this context.
Sudhakarji has been raising his hand for some time.
Because you see, let me finish this last one minute more. So this is the larger context in which, say, for example, when the BP's Even Ready committee was instituted in 2004, gave its report in 2005, You look at the kind of memorandums that valley-based or civil society organization based in the hills presented to the BP's Jivan Reddy Committee report, you'll find a dissonance of voice where the hill communities accept the Nagas because the Nagas are at the receiving end of Armed Forces Special Powers Act. But still today in the Kuki areas, inhabited areas, you still find that Assam Rifles or the Central Armed groups are considered to be fairly objective and neutral, and they're considered to be savior of the hills. And there is a historical pedigree to this. And that is precisely why, because the kind of antecedents of the police commando who had been responsible, for example, allegedly, responsible in killing down 8 of the 9, tribal martyrs in 2015. You have this long-drawn, sense of trust or legitimacy built up, and it will be naive to kind of dismiss that these are parochial, very narrow-minded, very sectarian, ethnicity-based mobilizations which have important, bearings on the way we see and look at, some of these important state institutional structure. So I think we have to nuance that, and how does this play over time, and the complicity or the more objective role of the armed force has to be juxtaposed with the very compromised role that the police commando have executed over time.
I think it's time I allow General Saab to speak. Tongal is waiting, and I must give, because you have made a lot of points and taken Bhagat Saab into conversation. He must also have the he must have a space to address those issues. But first to General Saab, to you, sir. Sudhakar ji. So can you unmute yourself?
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I have understood your obligations and operating parameters. I'll keep my statement short. Wish you had given me a chance to complete my
No, please. You
can
take your time, General Saab. You can take your time. That's not an issue. कई बार हो जाता है. I don't treat it like a TV debate. You see, I'm, I don't put. There are no ads here, so there is no commercial obligation on me that I need to cut short people. It's just that I need to accommodate everyone. Please take your time. Boliye.
Yeah. You see, I just want to link up with what I said. Getting peace and harmony at this juncture is a very, very hard thing to achieve. To achieve a hard thing, you have to apply hard options. What are the hard options? I have said seal the border first. Number 2, because why am I saying this, Kartika? More I study, more I do research, more I get convinced that it is the second Kashmir which is being created by inimical forces. It could be China's hand, it could be a foreign conspiracy, global conspiracy at play. So it could be anything. I personally, as per my assessment, this violence is going to continue even longer than what it has taken place 9 years back. So my assessment, it could be 20 years, 30 years, unless we nip the bud well in time. So therefore, it brings me, how do we achieve peace and harmony at this juncture? To me, it appears that not enough is being done. So what is required to be done? Firstly, you isolate the critical areas. What is the meaning of isolation? Isolation means the affected party or the stakeholders who are the victims. They need to be identified correctly. They need to be shifted out of the present place of residence, brought to safe and secure settlement areas. Those areas have to be kept under protection parties. Their supply chain survival kit has to be ensured that they are sustainable for the livelihood, and they have to be prepared for a long haul. The children have to be, the schooling has to be arranged, their health care has to be arranged, entertainment has to be arranged, games and sports, some kind of a creative modern life system has to be catered for. 1. Number 2, alongside what needs to be done is a military combing operation. Let me share with you, since it is a very unique kind of a debate you are holding, and I don't see any other channel giving so much of focus without any interruptions. I must compliment you and your team. Let me say that the military component today, when I say military component, it excludes the paramilitary forces. The Assam Rifle, the CRPF, the BSF, the Manipur Rifles, the India Reserve Battalion. Today, as things stand, the content and the density of army, regular army I'm talking of, in the same area is lesser, much lesser than what it used to be earlier. The Armed Forces Special Power Act having been removed, more say and more expectations will be always there from the police force who are operating. Therefore, what I'm coming to is, when you have combing operation, military combing operation, unless it is done in a precise manner based on surgical intelligence, so it will be basing, the operations will be planned on specific surgical information purely to disarm the people, get all this 3,000 balance of weapon system. And mind you, that the border has been sealed, we take it that no weapons are coming into Manipur. Third and most important point is, narcotics is playing a lot of havoc as my study and research. We need to take stock of the narcotics, and in this combing operation, it should be ensured that the military or the joint forces, they do not go in for jungle bashing. Jungle bashing will further alienate people. It will also cause or result in enhancing the trust deficit. Our aim is to reduce the trust deficit, bring it to the normal, acceptable level, and thereafter we talk of peace and harmony. Alongside what needs to be done is that it is very, very important that the peace effort and the investigation which is going on today, in my opinion, until unless the intensity of the violence is brought down to an acceptable level, these investigations should be put on hold for the time being, temporarily, maybe 10 days, maybe 30 odd days, maybe 2 months or 3 months. And alongside the peacemaking effort, also it will be futile unless there is a close participation and willing acceptance of the group. The group being a huge, humongous one, 50, 60 people, I think we need to be very, very calibrated, need to put our finger on those people who make a substantive, there is a high degree of acceptability of these leaders, and they should be representative of all the affected parties and the stakeholders. So therefore, it brings me to the sum total of all these efforts is that there are 5 or 6 components which need to be addressed. Number one, the military component is the combing operation. We need to withdraw all these weapons, recover them, put them back into the armory. Number two, the affected parties or the groups or the communities have to be put into the settlement, safe, secure settlement area. These settlement areas have to be provided with a long-term logistic plan of supply chain, sustainable supply chain. The children they have to be put into some kind of an academic curriculum, some kind of a creative and innovative curriculum, because to me, to my understanding, it is not going to finish off in 15 days or 1 month or 2 months or 6 months. It is going to last beyond 1 year. My assessment has never come so accurate, and let me tell you, the Minister of External Affairs has to engage with the military junta in Myanmar and tell them the red lines. These are our red lines. Please stop attacking this Meitei and the Kuki communities, because there is a migration taking place. Take control. Sooner we get the democracy back into Myanmar, I think it will play up in favor of Manipur. And last but not the least, thank you, Kartike. The point which I am saying is media has a role to play. Number one. Number two, the peacemakers have a role to play. The medical agencies, the employment opportunities, the development factor which the government of India has undertaken, all these aspects have to be looked at in a bipartisan manner. There has to be no parochial kind of leanings to anyone. And one last point is that there is a constitutional obligation which needs to be looked into. As far as I am concerned, if complete Nagaland has been given the status of the tribal status in the national schedule of tribes, why can't the Manipur, all the tribes be given the similar kind of status? I know it is a controversial statement, but as an independent panelist, I feel that this is a food for thought which the nation has to think of and find a solution, so that both the communities, they live in harmony and peace for times to come. Back to you, Karthikeyan.
Thank you. Varghese, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just going to take it forward from what General Saab has said. The 4 states bordering Myanmar, or Burma as its old name would say, that is Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram, are technically gateways for India towards Southeast Asia and its economy. And of course, we have a situation in Burma, but it has always remained in any establishment in Delhi about the economic potentials of these states. And look, we have trouble in most of them. We have Manipur is now in chaos. We have Nagaland in chaos. Mizoram, it took a long time to bring them onto the table, negotiate and control the situation. the four states and their economic potential is being ruined with the kind of situation that we see here with the violence that's coming in. The potential of it, even now, the local businesses have all been destroyed because of this violence. And it's going to take a lot of time to rebuild those businesses, to rebuild livelihoods, to bring that confidence that is there. The potential Manipur alone has is something to become like a Asian tiger somewhere in Southeast Asia as well. Because if successful, India's it could become the land port state for trade of goods between Southeast Asia as well as the whole of India. And all goods could pass through Manipur because better due to its geography suited to build in roads towards Assam and then to the rest of India. So this is the potential that it enjoys, and look at the geographical criticality of it. It's a geostrategic location that is in trouble right now. And I think both of them should understand how much and how great is their potential to economically benefit India and themselves as a state if they come together. Now, this violence is only destroying that potential, and I think a lot of not been highlighted about the potential of the state to actually become one of the rising economic centers in the Northeast as well. So, this violence looks like, as the General was saying, there are vested interests who wants to stop nationally from India to connecting with Southeast Asia, and something has to be taken care of with Burma because Burma seems to have kept it loose. They do not have a law and order. Myanmar has kept it loose, and in the northern part of Myanmar, they have still not been able to control the forces, and the Janta seems to be keeping a blind eye unless someone raises the issue. In that
Verghese, I had the opportunity to visit Myanmar, not only Yangon, but also Naypyidaw, and it's a general's country. It's a general's country, and army runs it. To you, Mr. Dongal, General made a point, investigation should be put on hold for now. Do you agree that the investigation should be put on hold for now?
Karthikji, before I come to your question, I'd like to raise few points. As a sociologist, by the way, I'm also an alumni of Delhi School of Economics, sociology student.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. So let me bring in some sociological perspective here. So we see, which I was not able to, highlight yesterday. We see Manipur, 3 communities. We have the Meiteis enjoying, what Bourdieu would term it as cultural capital. So all the cultural capital, let's call it cultural hegemony, has been so far been enjoyed by the valley. Now, when I say this, I'm not saying from the point of view of being a Kuki, but I'm saying this as a scholar who has studied now PhD in education, and I've seen how there is disparity, a lot of disparity, even in terms of education. Now, considering the problem and also the youth of Manipur, yesterday there was a news clip that was circulated where in COCOMI, 16 years and above are being trained. Youth, 16 years and above are being trained to volunteer themselves and to defend to fight for, for their land. See how mismanagement of administration, and also looking 10 years down the line, how, today's leadership has failed to look at the youth. Now I'm talking about, both the youth. Fail to look at the youth and their lives. We always believe that youth are the future pillars of tomorrow. Now today, when you curtail their freedom, when you curtail their rights, how are we going to build a nation or a state that would contribute towards the welfare of the country? Now this is very sad, and the leadership must question itself at the same time, must put an end and bring an end to this. Secondly, I like to give an analogy, because from the beginning of the discussion and also since the time violence erupted and the discussion that proceeded, Professor Swan and the rest of the Kuki professors, and obviously, of course, the meitei professors who are in the in the discussion group have always debated. And in fact, it has given us a lot of perspective in return. But then when I look at, as a scholar, when I look at things and bring it to perspective, I can see how, drawing an analogy, there are 2 kids in the classroom who always quarrels, always quarreling, always fighting. and creating a nuisance in the class. So as a teacher, what am I supposed to do? Do I make them sit together, or do I separate them and make them sit separately so that there is discipline in the class, so that they are in the part of the learning bandwagon? Now, the case of Manipur is just like that. I'm not trying to draw the Nagas into picture here, but then we should also consider our fellow brothers, the Nagas. They also have their share of interest and their share of politics. Now, if 2 or 3 people cannot sit together, it is always good to separate. Now, I'm vouching for separation because you see, if you look at the separation history of India, looking at Jammu and Kashmir for that matter, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, today there is, I think, resemblance of peace. What is wrong in separation? And you see, if you look at Jharkhand, if you look at Meghalaya, these are also separated or created in terms of cultural cultural affinity. And if you look at Andhra Pradesh, it was created out because of similarity of language. So this sort of separation does not mean we are going to disintegrate India, but then looking at the larger picture, I think we will in fact be successful in integrating India to a more peaceful country, wherein everyone will have the chance to thrive.
Okay.
And in conclusion, why I, as a research scholar, vouch for president rule all the time, because if you look at the steps taken until today, there is no abatement to violence. Now, if we are to disarm, I mean, the state government or those in authority very well know that these people needs to be disarmed, and they have tried their best. There's combing operation done, but disarmament or disarming of the people has not happened until today. Now, why not bring in president's rule for the good of all? I'm not talking in terms of just for the Kuki people, but for the good of all. And in fact, today, this freedom that everybody must enjoy, the freedom of speech and expression, the freedom to continue their life and thrive, I think the state, or for that matter, the center, must look this into very seriously, and then and then portray a good example to our neighboring countries, because India is not Myanmar. India is a democratic country, the largest democracy in India, and with the kind of youth population that we have, the potential that we have, today curtailing or otherwise derailing the life of youth will prove very dangerous. I think that much I have to say. Thank you for your time.
I think Varghese had a point. Varghese?
I was, in fact, the larger question when you talk about separation, it is not something that can be easily put into place, because the integrity of Manipur as a state is something that will always be on the on the drawing board. If you ask for separate administration in a manner within the boundaries of Manipur is a possibility that could be explored. Then the question would be, as an independent state, like a lot of people have been pushing for an independent state, where will the resources come from? Your population, your geography, already existing fault lines, because the foothills and is the place where we see the populations interspersed. So realigning of populations could take place. So in case a separation happens, and as they have said that you would still have a meitei minority within the foothill regions who would be, and then there are about mixed families, as you were rightly pointing out about friends, there are Kuki meitei mixed families. Where do their identities be there? So first they need to come onto the drawing board. They have to have a peace plan in place. It's not that we can, not say that the Kukis have their valid concerns, but it doesn't mean that the Meiteis also need to be looked into this, because they're talking about Manipur as their state and their identity. It cannot be seen as we are disintegrating their identity.
It cannot be in absence of the Meiteis.
It cannot be in the absence of Meiteis. So both of them have to come together, and separate administration is possible in terms of those territorial councils.
That is the debate. When you debate secularism, it cannot be in absence of the Hindu point of view.
Exactly, you cannot have that. So you have to have all the stakeholders on the place. I know it's a very complex. It's as the General Saab was saying, it's not possible that we can bring in peace immediately and solve all these historical problems.
I have a question for, apart from Bhagat Saab, you can respond to whatever. Is there a danger of, I don't know, a lot of people have used the word Lebanon, but I'll use a word this academically, balkanization of Northeast?
Yeah, see, you got it to the right point, Kartikeya. But I would like to see the whole issues. I won't go, responding to Swan and my other friend one by one. That's not my job. And if I do that, I fall into a particular line of narrative, which I had been trying to avoid myself. The kind of politics and the discourse of politics that is happening within the region in which Manipur becomes a part. And another larger politics, which involves Bangladesh, Myanmar, and India, this particular region, they are to be seen. In our discourses, unfortunately, except for General Saab, either we are talking of the very close kind of a politics, inter-ethnic politics, and almost forgetting the connections that are there internationally. And unless we look into those, we might miss the point. So coming first to the internal politics of the state and the region, till the other day, few years back, Biren Singh was one of the most favorite of the Hill communities, Hill MLAs. And many meiteis felt in his first regime, 5 years, that he was going for an appeasement politics, all his politics of going to the hills and so on, and alienating the meiteis. So many meiteis felt that he somehow is trying to appease the tribes people from the hills, but nonetheless, the kind of antagonism that happened during the regime of Ibobi Singh somehow has been taken care of by Biren, and we thought that people are coming together. He's being accepted in Senapati and other Naga inhabited areas. We thought, well, this is a good move, even if he's appeasing, what is wrong with that, if people can live amicably. Now, when did it start? Suddenly that Biren become a devil. And the point is, it has to do with the issue of deforestation and eviction of the people encroaching onto the forest, and lots of debate onto that. I'm not going into the details, but this perhaps is a triggering point where Biren Singh suddenly, and that also he woke up suddenly. I say he woke up suddenly in 2020-21, and so that there are so much of deforestation and poppy plantation, after which the heroin and other narcotics are being traded throughout Myanmar, India, and even the trading has reached up to Gujarat. If you remember, in Adani port, lots of heroin amounting to crores of rupees. Yeah. So suddenly Biren became a devil in disguise. But deeper politics is that 2 days back, Kartik, you might have noticed, one of the chief of the UKLF, a Kuki militant organization who is under sue with the government of India and Manipur state government, came up very candidly, and I was surprised to say that the BJP government has to keep their promise, which they gave to us when they supported their candidature. Mind you, there are 10 BJP MLAs in the Manipur Assembly, among the Kukis, and out of which 2 are cabinet ministers. And some of them are very, very close to Biren Singh. Many of the policies and programs in the last few years were taken along with them. So you cannot say that it is Biren Singh doing a devilish work. So the cabinet ministers, the MLAs, the BJP, 10 BJP MLAs from Kuki communities, they are part of the administration. And this voice of the UKLF chief saying that they supported militarily using arms to get them elected. And in lieu that this whole their dream of a separate administration will be fulfilled. And if they don't fulfill, then we will have to take up different steps. And this is on record. Already 2 days back, it is in the media. I can even share it with you. Now, this tells us a larger politics unholy alliance between democratic polity of this country with the armed insurgent groups who are being used, unfortunately, by the state machineries themselves. Now, this has to be, I won't go further. I mean, you know it better than me, what this implies. And is it that these militants are somehow being used for political purposes? And if this continues, it will not be very far away when you find another, what you call Khalistan movement and Bhindrewale coming, what you saw in Punjab, what you saw
Can I
LPT
refine your
Punjab.
statement, Bhagat Saab? Electoral purposes?
This is what I say. This is what this gentleman, the leader of the UKLF, is saying, that we supported the BJP candidates to win election. And now they have to keep the promise of giving us what we want. This is what on record. Now, another point, now let me shift Kartikeya to the larger politics of the subcontinent. At this point in time, when we are talking in the last few months, Myanmar is on turmoil. As General Saab has very clearly said, the military junta is really into the offensive against the minority communities, in which Kuki Chin groups are one. And they do not have any control over, I mean, correct me, sir, if I'm mistaken, whether in the Sangang province, Shan province, or Chin province, they do not have complete control. The state of Burma or Myanmar is only largely in the southern part and central, up to Mandalay and those areas. But in the northeast, then what you call northwest, the state doesn't really function. There are armed militants. So there are armed militants of the Chin, there are armed militants of the Kachin, and so on, that keeps fighting. And this fight, the turmoil that is happening in Myanmar, please see whether it has any repercussion on India. Second, at the same time, the Chittagong Hills of Bangladesh, there is a military offensive by the Bangladesh army against the Chin group, the Kuki Chin group. What you call Kuki in this side, they call Chin in the other side. So there has been some autonomy claim and several issues, and the Bangladesh army is having combing operation against the Chin militants there. And if you also look at the dreams of some of the militant groups, the idea of Jalengam or Joram, I don't know how feasible it is, but in the last 40 to 50 years, the imagined homeland, which comprises of Chittagong regions of Bangladesh, Chin and certain Sagang division parts of Myanmar, Mizoram and certain part of Manipur, is a contiguous area inhabited by largely these Chin Kuki groups. So a dream land that has been thought of and has been visualized cannot be completely done away or not been taken seriously, thinking that these are a faraway dream. But many things that is happening in India, particularly in Manipur, may have larger linkages with these dreams. Separate administration, what does it really mean? First, when I say you, the militants I'm talking of, it's a very well-planned program of completely wiping out the meitei population from Churachandpur and expecting repercussion to come from the valley, which happened. And meiteis have fallen into this line, and these areas exclusively inhabited by a community. This happened with the Nagas and Kukis. What was Naga Kuki class all about? 1992 to 1997, where thousands of people died from both sides, where about this area, which is exclusively inhabited by Kukis, exclusively inhabited by the Nagas. So this politics, partisan exclusivity is detrimental to the democracy of this country. And I am afraid that if this carry on, there will be further and further bloodshed. Now, so-called, and this will be my last point, the so-called Chin Kuki Jomi group, if I am not mistaken, the Baites control the Churachandpur city, Mars are a significant community, and Kuki Thado groups are yet another. Then the Wi-Fis, these are another. So-called this Kuki Chin Jomi group right now at this point, they had intra-conflict so much that more than 380 people died when Paites and Kukis clashed among themselves. So the Meitei and the Kuki Chin group clash is only costing 100 lives, but more than 300 lives have been lost in the internal fight among the Kuki Chin groups. There were also fight between the Mars and the Kukis. And Kukis even went up to the extent in Assam, and they had a fight with Dimasa. And let me tell you, one of the customary laws of the Kukis, unlike the Nagas, is this nomadic nature of the kingship, that one chieftain will take and can always, start a new village with few families. And this expansion of settlement often clash with other communities. Naga Kuki clash was precisely out of this customary practice of the Kukis, which infringes into what the Nagas claim their land. This happened with the Dimasas, and this even has happened in Chorachandpur, Bishnupur areas. So even these practices need to be really rethought. But more important point with which I end up is the kind of divisive politics that you see among the Kuki Chin Mizo Jomi group is something very dangerous for Indian state in the long run. And I will not be surprised if there are repercussions that can happen with the armed groups which the Indian army, particularly what I called Assam Rifles, have groomed and used for counterinsurgency program, and it has succeeded. It has succeeded in large scale, wiping out the valley-based insurgents from Manipur Valley, even from Churachandpur, Faizol area, with the help of the Kuki militants. So that has been a success story, but at what price? That is a big question one needs to see.
I think, that's...
Kartike, can I come in?
Absolutely, you can come in.
Yeah, let me come in with a more specific and more pointed, counterpoints to some of the mimicry of Bhagat, who unfortunately does not speak like a scholar, but speaks more like Biren Singh, on his chains of events where looks like the Sioux militants had been, directly participating in the peaceful rally, which is, far from the truth. And this is a part of bogey that Meitei intellectuals and civil societies have been bending around. And I think let us confront the truth. The truth is the peaceful rally went off peacefully, despite some of these minor skirmishes here and there. And it was, in fact, a deliberate attempt to provoke the peaceful rally goers when they returned back to Torbung Kayangwai areas, and Leisang Anglo Kuki Memorial Gate was burned down to provoke, which did not lead into violence somehow. And subsequently, when some of these rally goers were waylaid and beaten up, there was this intermittent sporadic outbreak of violence where the police went to the spot, tried to placate, the confronting mobs there. And
Kartike, I'm moving out. Kartike, I'm moving out because I have other things to do. There is another show that I have to attend.
Bhagat Saab, can you just take 10 minutes? That's it, Bhagat Saab. 10 minutes.
So I don't have to respond now. It is in the hands of good hands of Professor Swan, so he can manage the show.
Show can always be managed, but Bhagat Saab, it's always a pleasure to have you on my show.
Because he does not want to listen to the truth.
10:30 was the time I was told.
These are all planted stories.
Professor Swan,
we have to be wary of. We have to be cautious
Professor Swan,
because
Professor Swan, wait a minute. You both of you are my esteemed guests. I think Bhagat Sahab has some work to do. I'll allow him. But it's not that, he's not going to come back. He's going to come back to my show. He's come again and again like you. So you complete your argument, Professor Swan.
It's very unfortunate that Meitei scholars, cannot raise above board on this. And they, in effect, somehow perpetuate the kind of mimicry, that Biren Singh integrationist and majoritarian project wants them to advocate, which is in fact very unfortunate because it flies of the face of what actually transpired on the ground. Let us, for a moment, consider, for example, that this whole, targeting and maligning of Kuki, Chin, Mizos as, encroachers on lands, as illegal immigrants on land, and the fact that the meitei's demand for settled tribe are seen to be increasingly as disparate chains of, narrative. But if you really look closer and probe further, one of the common denominator which in effect tie all this up is the question of land, because you identified a particular geographical space as inhabited by so-called illegal immigrants, foreigners, encroachers who ought to be evicted. And this idea of evictions or labeling of, this stereotype or very xenophobic, labels against the Kuki, Chin, Mizo groups is very unfortunate, because if you look at Let Pao, who Bhagat has just mentioned, is one of the coterie of Biren Singh's ministry, because he happens to be the cabinet minister of Tribal Affairs and Hills Department. But the kind of popular support that Let Pao and his coterie received, in effect, is not actually what is projected here, because there is a lot of dissonance on the ground and the type of political leaders that the tribes elected representative do at the bidding of Biren Singh, because there is a lot of grouse against the way in which even tribal elected MLAs or the elected representative do not in effect popularly represent the demands and aspirations of the local population. And there is a lot of give in between. That's one aspect of that. Another aspect of that is that under the subcommittee chaired by Let Pao, who is again, as I said, a minister, so-called illegal immigrants in the wake of the junta coup in Myanmar since February 2021 was sought to be identified. And in April 2023, they identified something like 2,000 odd so-called foreigners, right? And they have been put up in rehabilitation centers, given that India refused to be a signatory to the United Nations Convention on Refugees. And given that there is no politics of refoulement in place, there is a lot of political pressure from, civil society organization in the hills to have a more humanitarian, approach to dealing with this existential threat that the co-ethnics from the Myanmar side have. And if you compare this with the Mizoram experience, where more than 40,000 refugees are rehabilitated, why is it that Meitei civil society organization, intellectuals and political leaders in the state whip up this communal frenzy to target the Kuki Chin communities as if majority of them are illegals or foreigners overnight? I think we have to really scratch beneath the surface of this political, high-handedness, the way in which political narrative are distorted and framed in order to malign and target the Kuki Zomi people, and which have to be nuanced. And the other thing is that in order to target, they have also been labeled as encroacher. Remember that this idea of encroacher came about because of the problematic nature in which the Indian Forest Act 1927 was sought to be imposed in the state in 1966. And when there was this representation against such imposition without following established procedure. Remember that the hill areas are outside cadastral survey. So if the land is not surveyed, Indian Forest Act cannot apply, right? Because the particular land under which an area has to be demarcated as reserve forest, protected forest, wildlife sanctuary under the Indian Forest Act have to be surveyed in the first place. And when there was no cadastral survey, there was this problematic law which was superimposed in 1966, against whom there were representations by so-called 38 village encroachers. And they had been reviewed by the assistant settlement officer, who is mandated under Section 4 of the Indian Forest Act 1927, and they have reviewed by going into the kind of representation, and they have in effect they have excluded the out of the 38, 24 villages out of these protected sites. And remember that 499 point something square kilometers are declared as Chorachandpur Khopum Protected Forest. And that is precisely where whole lot of maligning and stereotyping of Kuki, Zomi people as encroachers, as illegal immigrants, and so forth came about. So if you really see how things unravel of the time, given that it was already, excluded in 1971 till 1987 when there was this set of, reviewing happening when the assistant settlement officer, in effect, excluded this outside the purview of protected areas. Biren Singh government suddenly reopened this case in, July till around October 2022, and suddenly say that without proper, without proper inquiry, why should the assistant settlement officer be given the power to unilaterally exclude these villages? And they, in effect, refuse to regularize it. And that is precisely where they began to, conduct a series of forest survey in the hill areas. And that is the point in which the Hill Areas Committee, the statutory committee constituted under Article 371, reviewed way back in March 2021, saying that any provision of Indian Forest Act which is implemented and enforced in the hill areas without rooting the matter, which is mandated by law and as well as the constitution, would be null and void ab initio, right? So this is the context in which we have to see it. And this are very, distorted political narrative, political trump card that, some of these intellectual base in the valley very unfortunately mimic the state government by falling prey to their integrationist and majoritarian agenda, which is very unfortunate unless your audience get to know the historical context in which all of these contentious debates unravel in the hill areas. I do not see that meaningful dialogue, meaningful trust or legitimacy of the state can be restored.
Mr. Dongal, quickly to you. You had, I think, raised, and then I'll come to Sudhakarji.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll just take 2 minutes. One is to do with the understanding of the tribal people. Now, most of the arguments from the counter arguments received from our non-tribal scholars is that, they fail to distinguish between the tribal way of life and the non-tribal way of life. Now, I believe and, hold to the wisdom of the Britishers who were there at the beginning dividing these people. Most of the British officers were also anthropologists, by the way, and they had this study and also understanding of the tribal people. It was because of their backwardness and also their way of life, this disintegration or dividing of the people of Manipur happened. Now, when we are trying to argue today and try to equate the two communities as equals, it becomes very telling that who actually is at the receiving end. Obviously, looking at the violence history in Manipur also, we have seen how the Kukis, for example, are victims of violence. The Naga-Kuki clash that happened in 1993, and again now, so 30 years before, they have started just building themselves up. And there are a lot of testimonies, students, and even living testimonies where they have not got education. Today, so many people's lives are at stake. Now again, another violence on these tribal people. Now we can expect at least 25 to 30 years to count where they can rebuild themselves. Now, looking at the Imphal Valley, the case of violence in Manipur, we have the valley, violence was of course there, and a lot of people are victim to upspa. But with the,
Dongal, you made a point, sorry, I'm cutting you here. You said,
my conclusion, please, just 1 minute. Just
okay,
1 minute.
okay.
Yeah, with the revoking of upspa in the valley, obviously there is peace, and the valley people, the valley students, or be the tribals in the hills have come to the valley to study and get education. So whereas upspa is not, they are revoked in the hill areas. That's second. But the last point is regarding separation. When I say separation, let me make this point and I'll conclude. Is if you look at Goa, Sikkim, and most of the Union territories, they're not very large. And if you consider the Kuki inhabited areas, I think the area comprises 10 to 12,000 square kilometers, which is much bigger than Sikkim and Goa and most of the Union territories. So looking at the feasibility, physical feasibility is there. And as I have pointed out also earlier, cultural affinity, the languages of the Kuki-Jo people can be considered and considering them as tribals who needs to be protected. I think India must today try and bring solution to this impending problem. So that much I have to say. Thank you.
It's about inventing identities, reinventing identities. Sudhakar ji, are security forces in Manipur for a long haul? And I'm not asking this question for an effect. I'm asking this question because Indian security forces in J&K have been there for a long haul. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Okay. Am I audible now? Okay. Karthikeya, I have in some form or the other responded to your present question in my previous articulation. I'll repeat it because there is a bigger picture. We are losing sight of the bigger picture. If you study the criticality of a problem in isolation, it will throw up different, deductions. If you join the dots and study it in a comprehensive manner, it will throw up a different kind of a picture. So let me just paint the picture. Couple of days back, Itanagar, China skips the meeting of G20. It was followed by skipping a meeting there in Srinagar Valley. Also, it was followed by both these events were either preceded or followed by a couple of names in Arunachal Pradesh, which had been given Tibetan names and also Chinese names. Indian Ocean region, for the first time in the international water, the underwater topography was named based on musical instrument, Chinese musical instrument. You see, everything, if you piece them together, they give out a larger picture. There is a strategic encirclement of India taking place, unleashed by China. What does it mean? China's singular objective, stated objective, is to assert its Middle Kingdom, status of Middle Kingdom by 2049, so as to challenge, be a global power, and also pose a challenge to the single or unipolar superpower, that is the USA. Now, all these things put together, and look at the kind of nuances which are emerging. Least of all, if I may highlight, that the only country anywhere in the world, take name of any continent, if there is one country which has got trade surplus in its favor, in any of the continents, barring some exception with India, maybe for past 2 years or so, it is China. China has demonstrated the relevance of geoeconomics instead of geopolitics. Geopolitics was the mainstay during the Cold War between 1945 to 1991, consequent to which, after the disintegration of the USSR, one always thought that the unipolarity will bring about some kind of a liberal rules-based international order, but it was not to be seen. Kind courtesy, take the reference of what happened in Serbia, those 79, 82 days of aerial strafing by the NATO forces. And it was followed by, what has happened. The international order underwent change. Till 9/11, the same America was not understanding and accepting the definition of terrorism. And post 9/11, they went searching for Osama bin Laden, went into Afghanistan, did not find. You all know what happened thereafter. Global dynamics, global order. But what is happening today is that there is an Act-East policy of India, which is supposed to take off in earnest. Now, this Act-East policy is supposed to give ground connectivity through Manipur, across Myanmar, up to Thailand and beyond towards Southeast Asia or the ASEAN nations. Why ASEAN nations? Because it is one of the methods to counterbalance China's footprint and its domination in the ASEAN nations. There has been a void consequent to de-induction of American forces after the disintegration of Soviet Union. So that void has been filled up by China in form of BRI, in form of GSI, GDI. Lots of money has been pumped in, and there is going to be a very hell breaking loose if India does not go into Southeast Asian nations effectively to counterbalance China. And so is the thing happening with the extended standoff along the northern border. Our troops have got de-inducted. Same Manipur, I have highlighted that issue. From Manipur itself, the density of the regular army used to be pretty high than what it is today. There are lesser number of regular army present. It is being dominated or controlled by Assam Rifle, CRPF, BSF, and India Reserve Battalion, etc., etc.
Okay.
So army's density has gone down. Therefore, to say that army will be effectively able to discharge its mandate, well, we are calling the shot too high.
Okay.
It may not be expected. So therefore, it brings me to the point that there is a bigger challenge which is coming our way.
Okay.
India needs to brace itself up, needs to develop or adopt a political, a non-parochial, bipartisan kind of a policy for Manipur.
Okay.
If we do not do, in my understanding and reckoning, then we are opening up multiple fronts and creating a Kashmir Valley in Manipur, which will continue to last for 25 to 30 years.
Okay, I think that's very well put, and I think only thing which I want to say in the end, that there's a word called Vasudev Kutumbakam. The world is one family, love your neighbor and yourself. And I think if the Vasudev Kutumbakam has any meaning, I think it needs to get implemented in Manipur. Thank you all of you, Professor Bhagat, Professor Suan, Mr. Dongel, Sudhakarji, thank you so much, and Verghese to you too, for being in this show at the last minute on a special edition on Manipur. Thank you all of you.
BrahMos, stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection. The warship killer. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
मैं तो चलिया विदेश
No, it's not a story of diversity in India. It's about a burning desire to leave the country.